Please listen carefully.
Well, hello, universe, and welcome to the Optimist Daily Update. I'm Christy Jansen.
And I'm Summers McKay.
And we are part of the team behind the Optimist Daily, making solutions the news. We bring you reader-funded solutions news every day in order to change the tenor of news media, social media, and the direction of your day to help make it one focused on solutions.
7 days a week, we publish positive news stories written by award-winning journalists and delivered online to your inbox and through our social channels. And also, we are sharing these solutions in a commute-worthy, walk-worthy, home office-worthy, summer vacation-worthy podcast. Today is Monday, the 21st of June, 2021. Hey, Christy, happy summer.
Happy summer, Summers. This is your season.
It is. I love kind of leading with that. It's my favorite time of year to just tell people happy summer because then they have to super acknowledge me. It's really about just, owning my solstice. I'm just teasing, but I do love this time of year. And I think we were talking last week, Christy, about vision boards and kind of goal planning. And I was trying to really think about why is it that in kind of June, July, I feel most committed to my next goals, right? And I think because it's also that time of respite and the world does slow down a little bit during summer. You have longer days, you're more likely to do some fun stuff. School is out, which can be very stressful for parents, but also can be really, really delightful and fun. And, I think there's something to truly say to take a break, take a beat. And the world has been so crazy and so intense. So, guys, make sure to put a break on your calendar for this summer, even if it's just, a routine or ritual that's an afternoon off. Christy, what are you going to do to take care of yourself and take a break this summer?
It is also, we're all sort of being released from our semi-enforced, semi-self-imposed hibernation for the last year and a half or so. I plan to do a little bit of traveling. I have some friends who are going to be out in Boston. I'm going to connect with them. I have another friend who's getting married in Rhode Island this summer. So I plan to take a couple of plane trips
you broke the seal when you came to visit me in Austin.
I did. And I learned how terrible of a traveler I now am, but I hope to get better at that again. And it is, school is out. So my son is out of school and he's excited about traveling as well. Yeah. So that's what about you, Summers? What are you going to do to acknowledge this?
Well, I am making a commitment to playing in water as much as possible.
Yeah.
So while we are going to do some family travel this summer, that is giving me mountains of anxiety because I have never flown with a toddler. I've never flown with my daughter. I don't exactly understand how I'm going to get a car seat, a stroller, a booster seat. I don't actually understand how it will all work. So I'm pretty stressed about that. So instead of thinking about travel, because that's not my inspiration right now, it is water. And whether it's playing in a pool or playing on a splash pad or with our older daughter going and walking next to the little brook near our house, that is my plan, is focusing on water this summer. And, I think the world, we all need a little space. We all need a little inspiration. And that's why we kind of have a pretty special Optimist Daily update today, don't we?
We do. We have a guest. We're not diving into the headlines. You have to go look at the website for that or your emails. But instead, we have a great guest that we're going to share with you, Dr. Adolph Brown, or Doc, as we call him. He is a top motivational speaker and the founder and president and CEO of the Leadership and Learning Institute. He was a former public school educator and administrator, and also a university professor, dean, and businessman. But he has studied and worked alongside highly successful leaders and educators, and he's a dedicated optimist, which is why, he's a fan of ours. He's got a background in anthropology and psychology, which of course makes me happy.
What were you saying earlier? Anthropologists unite. You guys, all of you anthropology students here.
I love raising up the anthropology voices of the world because I think the study of human beings as if we are all one is super important. And there's so much learning that can happen by looking at people in the context of the cultures that they exist within. So when Doc came, when his name came up, and we were just happy to bring him on the pod today. And I think that's enough. I don't know. Do you want to add anything? Is that enough of your background?
That's plenty. I'm just an optimist and always looking for the bright side of things.
Yeah. And right now, now that school is done for the moment, we are looking at going back to school next in the fall or in August. And your focus on education and also on addressing sort of trauma to allow learning to happen. We just wanted to bring you on and say hello and introduce you to our audience.
Well, Doc, I have a question. We'll just kind of jump right into it. You work a lot with students and young people. Are you seeing, as kids are preparing for a different version of school year, this past year was pretty traumatic and pretty intense. What have you observed as an educator and a people observer has been the evolution of students' mindsets, and what should we be thinking about as we go into the fall school season?
I think that's a wonderful question. I think the fact that students have overcome all of the things that you just mentioned. I think we look back and there are educators that are thinking that learning was lost. There are people that are thinking time was lost.
Mm-hmm.
But the flip side of this is that we all survived it.
Mm-hmm.
So you can have a victim mentality or survivor's pride. And the fact that the students have overcome this speaks volumes. It speaks to resiliency in students. The issue is that because the brain is slanted toward the negative until you teach it how to look for positivity, it's really important to help people reframe and remember the things that they've overcome so that the next time they encounter a situation, they realize how much stronger they are for it.
Mm-hmm. It's that post-traumatic growth kind of orientation.
Certainly, certainly.
So, I mean, it's been a bit traumatic for all of us, and I think a lot of kids were upset. I have a 15-year-old son who seemed to do pretty well, but some of his classmates and his cousins had a much harder time with the remote learning environment, and they really were missing their school friends in like almost a visceral kind of way.
Mm-hmm.
But going back into school, I mean, which is still a few months away. Right now, it's just like school's out, and how do we bring that, enjoy that, like what Summers and I were talking about. I think you're on vacation right now. Is that right?
Correct. That's correct.
So thanks for joining us.
How does it feel? How does it feel to be on vacation? And have you kind of gotten more insights, or how does it feel to be on vacation? Because that's new to everyone right now.
Well, that's part of our coping strategies. We take multiple vacations a year, so it's nothing for us to kind of leave, decide in a weekend that, hey, we're going to get away, but that's all a part of maintaining a positive outlook, being at a vantage point away from, the drama and trauma and stress. So, I think as children go back to school, I think, as a clinical psychologist, I can talk about the trauma that's experienced and adverse life experiences. I think that if we start asking students what's better, asking people what's better, and it's not, necessarily toxic positivity where we're saying, we're happy, happy, joy, joy, ignoring everything that's happening in society. It's not that, because I believe that to heal it, you have to reveal it. That's a part of growth.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, it's how we frame things. So as much as the students went through, it's important to remind them that they did get through it. Remind them and share with them the skills that they had to actually get through this. So it's a human inclination to talk about the negative, the problematic things. I start every session with my clients by saying, "What's better?
What's better?
What's better?" And we go from there and we build. I say and they'll tell me, and I'll say, so on a scale from 1 to 10, 1 being horrible, 10 being great, where are you on that scale today? And they'll tell me, and then I'll say, well, you're a 5. What will it take to make you a 6? So the reframing of things is kind of absent, because in trauma, it kind of puts us in survivor mode as opposed to, necessarily just looking for the greatness in it and looking at the person that we can become as a result of it.
Looking at the opportunities that are actually embedded in those challenges.
Yes.
I think that's such a valuable thing and suggestion really for families and just people in general is sitting around the dinner table and how do you initiate conversation when everyone's in their own heads or minds or carrying their own, stuff is start your family conversations with, hey guys, how's everybody doing today? What's better? I
Yeah.
love
What's better?
that. I love
What's
that as a,
good?
yeah. What's
Yeah.
good? What's the
What's
good
good?
Exactly.
today?
That's right. Yeah, that's what my kids say. I say what's better. My kids always say what's good. I have one that says what's goody. So they get it.
Now, as we look at our society, it's not just kids who have been through a heck of a year. It's adults. It's everyone, everyone from generations. What are you seeing with people in general, and what perspective do you want people to see as we chart this new path?
Well, I would like people to actually see the things that have come out of everything that we've gone through, from the political strife, from the racial unrest, to just kind of look at what has come out of it. Of course, there's some really bad things that put us here,
Hmm.
and we must deal with it. We have to deal with these things, but at the same time, let's also talk about the good. Let's talk about the fact that Juneteenth is on the verge of becoming a national holiday. Let's talk about
It got signed on Friday. It actually got,
wonderful,
or yeah, I think it was actually
wonderful.
Thursday. It got signed. It was such breaking news that we had to update our headline.
Definitely. So
You're on
so things
vacation
from that
also.
Yeah.
that's right. So from the things of that nature, from the fact that police overreach is being challenged.
Hmm.
I mean, there's just so many things that it's a conscious raising time. And as much as we went through the trauma to get here, I think true change is really messy.
Hmm.
And I think we really avoid talking about the true process, or as I like to call it, the transformation that change brings.
Hmm.
Yeah, and I think you were talking earlier a little bit about the hidden suffering that we're all carrying, and
Yes.
how
Yeah.
and how within that, how can we give ourselves a break, but then also give the people around us a break. I love how the different phrases. I wrote this down earlier. You're saying our personal storms are getting other people wet. But how do we look for the best in the world, or how do we look for what's good or what's better when we're all in the midst of our own personal tempest? What are the tools we can use to turn our own attention?
The mirror.
The
That's the
mirror.
number one tool.
Mm.
The mirror. And the fact of the matter is, we constantly look for an enemy for the various things that we experience.
Yeah.
And I say, don't look for the enemy. Look to the inner me. Look within
Inner me.
yourself to
Oh,
see
okay.
inner
Mhm.
me,
The
the
inner me.
inner me. And the better we're able to deal with the things that we carry, the better we're able to acknowledge the stuff that we have won, the losses, the trauma, the rejections, the better we're able to acknowledge that within ourselves, the more understanding we can become when dealing with other people who are dealing with the same. So that's really just empathy. But empathy is kind of difficult to establish when we're constantly looking at others and judging, and the moment the mirrors put on us, we become lawyers. So I really think the focus, I would like to see the focus on individuals. I tell people all the time with regards to everything that happens in society that, yeah, we were concerned about the White House and the State House. What if we all just took a moment and put that much attention into our own houses? And when we talk about bad apples and different professions, what if we're the trees? As the
Hmm.
adults, we are the trees, so we're responsible for those apples before they leave our homes. So I would really like to see, just from a very basic level, of people just looking inwardly. And I think that's the that's the crux of true lasting change.
So a lot of the folks who are listening to the Optimist Daily Update are probably inward lookers, right? It's one of those things that we know at the Optimist Daily. Sometimes we can preach to the choir. Uh, However, it's really important to give our listeners tools to be advocates, to be emissaries out to others. What do you think are good ways for people to spread that kind of a message, spread that inward looking message. And, in addition to be the change and all of the things that we know, you've done a lot of speaking throughout the world, and you've done a lot of inspiring throughout the world. What do you think people can sort of take with them to go spread and share?
Well, I think the biggest thing, motivation, and I know people call me a motivational speaker because I smile when I speak, but I really think motivation is at its crux ineffective. I mean, it's things like self-discipline.
Hmm.
It's actually any word that begins with self, from self-discipline to self-respect. So when
Self-love.
exactly. So any word that starts with self, just really when we kind of hone in on those things and kind of put those in balance and perspective, more is caught than is taught. So children in schools, when teachers have it, students are looking at teachers long before they're listening. When parents have it, the same of course happens. This Our kids are looking at us more than they're listening at first. Same thing in society. So I would say, I think the term that everyone uses and knows is being a role model,
Hmm.
for what you stand for. So, I have a saying that, I basically treat people better than they treat you. Someone gets in front of me sometime, people they'll call for first class, when I travel sometimes. And I'm not the guy that buys it, but I have a million miles on like four different airlines. So that they constantly upgrade me. So, they'll call for first class and there'll be people that will get in front of me, as opposed to saying, what's wrong with these people? I'll say, what might I be wrong about? Do they not see me? Do they not know the line that I was standing here? Or maybe I don't know the lines over there. But regardless, um, we're getting on the same plane. And, I'm an educator at heart. So when I get on the plane and they see me after they stood in front of me, if they didn't know I was in first class, then they realize it. And sometimes that's a teachable moment when they realize, oh my gosh, I didn't realize. So,
As you're saying that, it's like find the lesson, not the fight.
Right.
yes, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
And
Doc, I really love this, but I feel like that's such a challenge to get someone who is not in that self-reflective space to take a pause. If you're dealing with somebody who's looking for a fight, how do you turn that? How do you absorb that energy and shift it?
Well, it's all about what that person's carrying. People that look for fights, or there are people that wake up every single day to scan the environment for opportunities to be disrespected or opportunities for offense,
Hmm.
Mhm.
and it's based on what they're carrying, and not working through what they're carrying. If I call it in my writings two backpacks, the invisible stuff that we all carry, and if we don't empty it, I mean, those rejections become projections onto other people. So they got to get out. When children don't talk things out, frustration and agitation, they act it out. Adults are the same. So you have
Mhm.
people that are running around throwing rocks, and it's not the cause that they're standing for. It's the fact that they just want to throw rocks and feel better. They,
Hmm.
and sometimes they don't have the coping skills or capacity to truly deal with what they're carrying. So you
Mhm.
said self-reflection, but the primary goal is that self-reflection that can ultimately lead to self-correction. So
Mm.
that's kind of where I live. I mean, I write about systemic issues. I'm very active in dismantling oppressive systems. But at the same time, every single day of my life, wherever I am, the work that I commit most to is being an individual that represents the good in all things.
That's so powerful. And I think what I like about this reminder is that, Christy, I think you and I keep kind of asking the question, but like, how do we get the people who don't get it to get it? And at the end of the day, what Doc is reminding us is that that's not our job,
It's not our
right?
job.
It's not our
Yeah.
job. It's not the focus. And while we run the Optimist Daily for the purpose of helping change consciousness, we can't force it. We can just continue to do a good job at what we do and supporting our writers and our technologists and giving them the forum.
Mhm.
But it's lessons, not fights. And I even as expansive and introspective as Christy and I think of ourselves, right? We all need reminders, and
Mhm.
we all need to just kind of sit in our own responsibility for ourselves. And
Definitely.
that, I think, yeah, Doc, do
Yeah.
you want to sort of add to that?
Yeah,
I feel like I'm
think
getting a heck of an inspiring conversation right here. I hope our listeners are too.
well, I think what happens, and don't get me wrong, I could give you 5 steps, for the podcast or 5 steps for this. What ends up happening is those are like really cheat sheets.
Hmm.
Um, when people ask me, what book should I read about this equity, diversity, what book, and they want to have a book study. You
Yeah.
know, it's really a heart study. It's not a
Mm.
professional learning community. It's a heart study. Once you put it out there, outside of yourself, it's kind of like that vision board.
Mm-hmm.
The brain's looking at it, and the brain's going to try to find a way to do it. I get that, but there's some work that has to be done internally, and it's messy. It's hurtful. It's sometimes it shows you things about yourself that you don't like. And
Right.
if we can't address that stuff, so every time, hard things come up, we want to push it away. And what society does is we deny it. We're in denial. So denial doesn't mean it didn't happen. Denial just means it's too painful for me to acknowledge, and I don't want
Yeah.
to deal with it.
Hmm.
So I'm constantly pushing the plate back in people's face and saying, hey, that's your stuff. Deal with it.
It's funny that you mentioned, the 5 things this, 5 things that, because I think you and I both do a fair amount of, media appearances, and we're always getting asked for what are your 5 tips for? And
Yes.
I don't know if
Yeah.
you have this challenge, but I do, because every time I write something, our publicity team comes back to me and they're like, so Summers, we didn't need an essay. We needed
Right.
bullet points. I'm
Yeah.
like, but life is not bullet points.
It's
No.
not.
Improvement and change aren't
Yes.
checklists, they're
Yes.
evolution.
That's the most
And
challenging part of
yeah.
of media exposure for me, is
Mhm.
that I'm not someone that's in this, to kind of check a box. I'm
Right.
in this to make deep positive changes, and it's not something that I've done on television. I've done this in my professional life for over 30 years. So, and I've seen that process. So it's difficult sometimes to translate that into steps, like you said.
Hmm.
Mhm.
I mean, that's just sort of not where healing really happens anyway, or
Right,
that's not
right.
how it happens, right? And I think
Yes, that's correct.
a lot of your work is relationship based healing,
Yes.
and by forming those connections and helping, sort of giving that hand so that people are brave enough to look at those, all of that messiness, and feel safe enough to be able to take a step out of that traumatic shell that's been constructed because of the life experiences, and or the structural issues that are facing them, or the interpersonal relationships of their families and their communities. So I love what you're saying, and I think it's an interesting to listen to the two of you, because you are both out there in front of the cameras. I like to stay back a little bit, and Summers is always saying, okay, so but what's the 30-second version of that dissertation
Right. Right.
you
Right.
gave me?
Exactly.
um
Exactly.
I struggle with that too. I wanted to talk to you a little bit about some of the work you're doing to address things from an individual perspective, but also looking at the group dynamics. 'Cause I know you go back and forth between that with your study of personal development, but in the context of group dynamics, and addressing structural issues. Because I think both of those things have to be looked at. And one of the areas that I'm really curious to get your take on is what we sort of hearing, the school to prison pipeline that a lot of our country has been experiencing. I mean, I hear that I do a lot of research in this area, but I don't know what you would say to that, Doc.
Well, first of all, when you mention school to prison pipeline, people that haven't researched it immediately assume that, it's an offense to teachers. So, the brain will look
Mm.
for,
Mhm. Who's the
the
fight?
next,
Yeah.
exactly, the fight. And it's not. My master's thesis, one of them was dismantling the school to prison pipeline. And all it meant was students or drop out. And that's how it initially started, when students drop out. But the research actually shows that students don't necessarily all drop out, particularly the highest risk students. They're pushed out. Sometimes there's no supports, they fall out. So when these students fall out, primarily Black and Brown students, there's a $1 billion industry that benefits from this, and that's the prison system. What we found in my research, we interviewed inmates all over the country, about their experience in public education. And many of them said that they felt they weren't connected, they were invisible, they weren't acknowledged. Then we went back and we interviewed teachers, public school teachers. And what we found with public school teachers, particularly the new ones, was that classroom management was the least taught subject to teachers. So, at that time, over 25 years ago, there became a push in higher education to teach new teachers about what classroom management meant. It didn't mean managing children. It didn't mean controlling children and students, which some people think it means. It means you manage your classroom setting and you lead your students. So that's what we found out. And we also found out that because of those lack of connections, that teachers needed to be more purposefully engaging with students and relevant with all students, making sure that classroom content met everyone's needs, regardless of their language, age, race, religion, gender, education, or disability or economic status, sexual orientation. So we had to make sure that everybody was included. And that's really the school to prison pipeline in a nutshell.
I really appreciate you clarifying that, because sometimes you get these phrases, which you're right, they can alienate as much as inform.
Yes.
And by pinpointing the words and explaining what's more behind it, it makes it make more sense.
We found at Optimist Daily explaining and we felt defund the police was a very alienating phrase instead of
Yes.
finding a way to shed the light. And so we looked at that solution in particular and really worked a lot to tell stories about what a reallocation of resources for public safety would be, because the catchphrases can really catch you and keep you from learning.
Definitely. And I love the fact that you addressed that, because that wasn't the intention initially. The intention was that, hey, we have to get your attention.
Yeah.
So there had to be
Right.
something that was so powerful and world stopping that people would say, hold it.
What's that?
And everyone would
Right.
Exactly. But of course, as you see, it did have some really negative implications. But I love the fact that you addressed that. That's extremely courageous, and I applaud your team for that.
And I think this is so interesting because we were talking before about the sort of creating those little cheat sheets, those little 5 solutions for this, 5 solutions for that. And that's the problem when you have these really complex, massive subjects. To boil them down into a catchphrase, you leave so much on the table, and it just ends up mystifying and covering over things in a way that becomes not productive. So
Definitely.
So I feel like we're so in alignment, Doc. I love
Yeah.
that.
I just started accepting interview requests that dealt with equity, inclusion, and diversity, stuff that I've been writing about for years and researching. And the reason I just started accepting them, because in the past I felt like, they weren't sound bites, and I felt like they deserved so much more than sound bites. But I learned from a great team led by someone named Valerie Allen that sound bites, constructive sound bites, and well thought of sound bites would actually help heal in a different venue or avenue than, so.
And they
I do
can
that
can
now.
offer the conversation starters that
Right.
we
Exactly.
wouldn't have otherwise had.
It's the tip of the
Exactly.
spear
Yeah.
that gets under your skin, and then you have to talk about it and open it
Right.
up in a bigger way.
Exactly.
Well,
Go
I think
ahead, Christy. I was going to say, I'm here. I am always watching the clock. That's
I
my
know.
job.
Well, it's
But
time
wow.
for us to wind us up. I feel like this has been a really profound conversation, and we're thrilled that we got to spend this time with you, Doc. But we always like to end our conversations with our guests, asking them one question. And I'm really curious to hear what your answer might be. But the question is, what today is making you optimistic? Where's your optimism being fed from today?
My optimism is being fed from the fact that many of the undercurrent negative types of things that have happened in society to various people are no longer an undercurrent. They're now in people's living rooms, from the television, on social media. And as negative as that can seem, this exposure is causing us to talk about it, not just talk about it. This exposure is causing us to do something about it. And yes, it may be uncomfortable at first, but I'm optimistic that I know that true change is messy. So I'm optimistic that we're on a path of higher ground. We're going to higher ground. And, not everyone wants to go and not everyone believes that it's needed, but the fact that it's in our faces, I'm optimistic about it.
And we'll get to the top of this mountain eventually.
Exactly.
Oh, Christy, I love you taking it out on a hiking metaphor. That's that. Christy and I are bonded by our Kilimanjaro climbs. So, Doc, thank you so much for being on the conversation today. Can you tell our listeners where they should find you, where we should read more of your wisdom? Where can people who want to know you know more?
At docspeaks.com, like the doctorspeaks.com.
Perfect. Well, we'll also put that in the show notes as well as your social media profiles. Everybody check those out for more. Thank you today for listening to this Optimist Daily Update, this very special Optimist Daily Update. As you all know, we promise to continue to share positive solution-based stories with ideas on how you can participate in this changing world and ensure it is changed for the good. We promise to continue to cover the current events with accuracy, legitimate sources, and offer you the information needed most to chart new paths for all of us. As you guys know, we are a reader-funded startup and we appreciate your support. So if you have not yet, please sign up and contribute as little as $5 a month to the Optimist Daily on optimistdaily.com. Be part of the solution-changing consciousness and addressing our world's biggest challenges with a problem-solving mindset. Thanks everybody for helping keep the Optimist Daily free to all who need it, supported by those who can. We are grateful for you, and Doc, we are grateful for you. Thank you for an amazing conversation, and we'll see you guys tomorrow.